the questions that I asked them were, what are the skills development for students? What's the benefit of this? What jobs are at the end of it? And we work in an industry with esports and video games that's $300 billion a year. So there's huge job opportunity in this. And so it's persuading parents, it's persuading them to just listen for 30 seconds to say, look, there's skill development in this, soft skills, communication skills, all those things.
Hello and welcome to Smart Profit AI. Today we are diving into one of the most exciting and challenging spaces in EdTech in the UK. While innovations is booming from AI-powered classrooms to esports in education, startups in this sector face some very real hurdles on the road to impact. In today's episode, we'll explore the 5 biggest challenges facing EdTech startups in the UK today, which are securing funding and investments, navigating the regulations and policies, driving adoption and building trust in schools, scaling effectively in a fragmented education system, and proving measurable impact and outcomes. To unpack these, I'm joined by David Higginson from Diagon eSports, a company bringing structured esports into international schools. David will share his insights not only from Diagon's journey, but also from the wider EdTech landscape in the UK. David, welcome. Could you start by briefly introducing yourself and Diagon for listeners who may not be familiar with your work?
Yeah, hi, Annika. Thank you. Nice to see you. Nice to be here. So my name's David Higginson. I am the Chief Revenue Officer. This is my second foray into EdTech.
Okay, great. And what is your day-to-day responsibilities like?
So predominantly sales, revenue, partnerships. That would be my primary remit. That's the Chief Revenue Officer or CRO element of my job. But as a co-founder, obviously I have conversations across the whole gamut of the business, from product, marketing, staff, HR, you name it.
Okay. And just to dive into a bit more about Diagon, what is it that you actually do with your business?
So we use video games and esports as a way to educate. So we try and harness student passions. The stats will say that 90+% of students will play video games some regularly. And so we try and harness that and give it educational benefit and educational outcomes through competitions and also through an esports club.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. So let's start with the first big hurdle then. For many EdTech founders, securing investments in the difference between an idea and a product in schools, what has been your experience here with in terms of funding and investment to your business?
Yeah, funding is definitely a significant challenge for any, in my experience, UK startup. The valuations that you might see as a UK or a European business versus what you might see valuations and funding rounds in the US especially are extremely different. The appetite for risk and size of deal in the UK is frankly a lot smaller. So you do have to be realistic around funding. And I think being prepared to self-finance to some degree, whether that's salary sacrifice, whether that is your own cash flow or friends and family, is often a great place to start. Because if you're going outside of yourself and going to say friends and family, you've got generally that trust, and people will be prepared often to listen. Well, they'll be prepared to listen to you and potentially be prepared to back you.
Okay, great. And how do you kind of navigate investment conversations with UK EdTech sectors?
I think the key thing is just to be transparent. I would urge that, people can tell when you're generally, whether you're being totally truthful or, hiding something a little bit. So I would say the key is to be totally transparent, whether things are going brilliantly, whether things are going slightly less well. Just be honest. Obviously, anyone who's looking to invest in a business is going to want to hear about the potential upside. So you need to, focus on that. But equally, there's no point in promising, that you're going to be turning over, $1 million in revenue next month or £1 million in revenue next month when, you're a brand new startup and your product's not ready. So be honest.
Yeah. Okay. That's very true. I totally agree with that. So do you think UK investors understand the long-term value of EdTech, or are they more hesitant compared to other industries?
Well, I think I've only worked in financial services and education, so it's only a narrowish field of experience. But from conversations that I've had with investors across sectors, there is definitely a feeling that edtech is a solid place to invest, generally to a large extent recession proof. Obviously, children still need to go to school, but that it is perhaps a steady eddy, a slightly less exciting place to invest than, fintech or
Yeah.
AI, obviously, at the
Yeah.
moment.
Okay. Yeah. Of course, even with funding, the education space is heavily shaped by policy and regulations. How have you seen this play out for startups like Diagon?
I think for Diagon, what we've tried to do is minimize the potential impact of that. So I was previously involved with an activities management tool where we had to extract data from the school's management information system, and we needed a lot of data about the students and their parents and medical information. So that obviously created significant, GDPR and data protection hurdles. So I think where possible, you should try and reduce your reliance on those things. Obviously, for certain products, you will need that information, but you do need to, for your own time benefit, kind of be mindful of those things and keep them to the minimum level that you need, I would say.
Yeah. And other than GDPR policies, have you ever come across any other policy barriers? Have you ever encountered with any other policies?
For Diagon, it's been predominantly around safeguarding. So when we run clubs with schools, typically we run those remotely. But even in that scenario, how we handle the interactions with students. So for us, we try and do that via a teacher or always with a teacher present. But obviously, if we're running a club in person or if we're running an event in person, then we certainly have to fulfill, any safeguarding requirements, risk assessments, et cetera, et cetera. So, which of course we are all as businesses happy
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
But when you are a startup and if you're running a lean team, this is why I
Yeah.
was talking about minimizing your exposure to those things where you can. Filling out a 50-page risk assessment is time consuming and something you'd rather be spent doing something else.
So would you say, this leads onto my next question, if you could change one policy for a better support for edtech startups, what would it be? Would it be the risk assessment, as you were saying?
It's an interesting question. I don't know. Like, I understand why we are asked these questions.
Yeah.
I think you feel like sometimes, let's say with risk assessments, or that I feel, you sometimes wonder when you're filling out a 50-page form whether they could have condensed it to 45 pages, 40 pages.
Yeah.
I think that's the main issue. It's not that there are protections, of course, it's the level of detail that sometimes feels onerous. Whether that's fair or not, I don't know. But again, when you're busy, you are trying to move on to your next client meeting.
Of course.
Balancing those things is a
Yeah.
challenge.
Yeah, no, I do understand obviously with the education system, working with children, safeguarding and all of those policies, they're the most important because I guess you're working with children and you have to have the background check of everything, of how you are going to regulate and keep them safe. And yeah, so I do understand that point of view. So now, even if the product is ready and compliant, the real test is getting schools and teachers and parents on board. What do you see as the biggest adoption challenge?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So for us and for esports, because esports and education is new, it's, sometimes you feel like you're just kind of, talking or shouting out into the ether. So finding the right person in a school for us has been a challenge. Sometimes it can come from a top-down approach, from a member of the senior leadership team. Sometimes it can come from an engaged teacher who loves working with Minecraft or some, or a video game of some description. So for us, it's been having a clear path of entry into a school has been the most significant initial hurdle. And then, of course, the obvious question which people will ask is, screen time, it's a bad thing. And again, there's valid concerns there, but I think there are quite clear ways to overcome those objections.
Okay, and obviously convincing schools to adopt new technology can be tough. What have been the biggest hurdles with Diagon when working with international and UK schools?
Yeah, it's been that perception piece mostly around video games
Yeah.
and how to mitigate that. So, for example, for us, a lot of the questions the schools ask are questions that I ask. So, my co-founders, Elliot and Eunice, who are the video game and the eSports experts, much more so than I, the questions that I asked them were, what are the skills development for students? What's the benefit of this? What jobs are at the end of it? And we work in an industry with esports and video games that's $300 billion a year. So there's huge job opportunity in this. And so it's persuading parents, it's persuading them to just listen for 30 seconds to say, look, there's skill development in this, soft skills, communication skills, all those things. There's jobs at the end of it. And also, when you talk to senior leaders, it's around inclusivity and being able to have a different cohort of students represent the school, wear their school badge, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay. And how important is building trust with teachers and parents, and what strategies have worked for you?
Yeah, so we very early on built research-backed PDFs and collateral that showed skill development, that talked around, what do we do and why does it benefit and why is it relevant? And we prepared that, and we internally still refer to that as our parent pack. And focusing on that message is definitely hugely important. We have a very similar document for senior leaders with some slight changes in sort of terminology, etc. But understanding and trying to preempt the objections and say, look, we understand you have questions, they're perfectly valid, but we believe there are good answers to those questions and solid benefits to what we do, has definitely been a huge part of our output and definitely helped us grow more quickly than I think we otherwise would.
Course. And just going back to the statement about how parents or teachers, they talk about a lot of screen time. How do you kind of navigate that conversation when it comes to screen time? Because obviously children do have a lot of screen time if parents aren't strict on that.
Yeah, I think there's a few ways to handle it. The person in EdTech that I respect a lot said that it's about being a collaborator rather than being a consumer. And that's definitely the case in what we do. So, you're not just sitting idly watching a YouTube video and, zoning out, as we know that children do. My children do that from time to time. I try and catch them, but of course they do from time to time. We all do. So there's that part of it. I think the other thing about screen time, and who knows what, careers will look like in the future with AI. But if you look at jobs of today, look at our interview now. I
Yeah.
mean, screen time is a thing that we do in our lives. So it's actually currently it's a skill that we all need. We need to learn to be digital citizens.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, there are clearly reasonable concerns, but I think also you just have to look at the reality. I'd love my children to just, I was looking at a photo last night of London in the 1920s, and there was still a part of, I can't remember which suburb of London it was, and it was looking down a farm track, with a
Yeah.
tractor, that doesn't exist anymore, right? I mean, we're living in a digital age.
Exactly.
And there's one final thing that we've done with some schools that's worked really well. We're typically a co-curricular activity. So there will be some schools that will say, well, look, if you want to do a sedentary, physically sedentary activity on a given day, then on another day, you need to do a physically active activity. And, so then you can have that balance, because we certainly are not saying don't do physical sport. We are just saying, there's other things that you can do in a co-curricular program as well.
Let's move on then. So once adoption starts, scaling becomes the next mountain to climb. Different schools have different systems, budgets, and tech readiness can make scaling complex. So how has that looked from your side?
Yeah, I think in the very early days, you have to be flexible with your pricing. You really kind of have no choice, because unless you are in a very established area of what a school is buying, then either there won't be an established model or you will be some form of discretionary spend. So you need to have some flexibility in approach in order to give you the opportunity to prove your worth. Obviously, you need benchmarking, you need a rationale, you want to have fair pricing that has some form of calculation behind it. But as long as you, again, we found being open and honest and transparent is like, this is how we calculate our price, but we can do you a trial for, a fixed period of time, or we can try it with a fewer number of students, or we can try it for, in one game rather than 4 games.
Yeah.
You help adoption. I think so. Flexibility on pricing, I think, is probably the most important thing. I would have one word of warning there, from personal experience. And I think free trials are often a risk not worth taking, because they don't encourage buy-in and information from the party you're trying to sell to. So we've run several free trials in various iterations with both Diagon and previous venture, and I would say largely they haven't worked. I think you need some form of commitment, even if it's a small token amount of money. Something that someone, even if it's £20, make sure that there's a commitment from the other side to
Well,
implement.
okay. And what would you say was your hardest part so far scaling Diagon?
I think, there would probably be, well, there's a number of examples. Finding the right person to talk to in a school has been tough. So the activities management platform that I was previously involved in, you had 2 or 3 people in a school, the right profile that you could approach. For Diagon, it's much less clear. That flexibility on pricing, especially in a new market, and that in itself creates operational hurdles, because the team that bills for us are often saying, how are we pricing this particular client? So then you have your own internal, challenges, time consuming, and they add up. And then I think, as any part of any small startup, you will be wearing multiple hats. So whether you're making that choice about which of the 25 emails that you need to action at 10:30 at night,
Yeah.
and you're not going to get to all of them, is a challenging decision. And the idea that I would say is make sure you just tackle at least one of them, rather than thinking, oh, I don't know which one to tackle and I'll do none of them, which is
Yeah.
very tempting sometimes. And I've definitely fallen into that trap. But doing something, even if it's one thing, or saying I'll do something for 5 minutes, often leads to some productivity and a better feeling when you wake up the next
Yeah.
day.
Of course. And how do you see smaller startup competing with large established players in the edtech market?
Yeah, I think there are maybe some interesting angles that smaller startups can take there. One of the things that I've heard talked about a lot with, smaller startups are lean, they are agile. So you're able to listen and change what you do or adjust what you do based on consumer feedback, which is hugely well received. And bigger players are much, much less able to do that. So if you listen to the pain points when you are selling, when you're talking to your prospective client, if you're competing against a bigger player, there will be things that bigger player cannot do that you can do.
Okay, yeah.
And so offering the ability to shape your product, and if clearly you have to be careful how you do that, because you can't please everyone. Offering someone, at the very least, you will be part of a focus group. We will listen to your opinion. You'll be part of 10 customers that we really listen to. And, we value and try and shape our product around your feedback. That has a lot of value. Without naming names, I can think of several larger edtech companies that kind of people don't talk necessarily that favorably about. They rely on these products, but they don't talk so favorably about them because they're these behemoths now.
Yeah.
That that are hard to change, and service times are a bit slower, or this, the product, they don't listen to my ideas on product. So use that to your advantage. yes, we're small, yes, we're new, but we will listen to you. You can help us shape it, and people will listen. Not everyone, but you'll find someone to listen, and that early champion hopefully will help you on your way.
Okay, great. And finally, perhaps the most important piece is the impact in education. Proving that your solution genuinely benefits students is crucial. How do you approach that?
Yeah, so for us, I would totally agree. Especially, we've really focused on this, especially because of that negative perception
Yeah,
around video games.
yeah.
So when we are running our program in schools, we measure 21st century skills or soft skills, and we measure game-based skills. So you might be working on communication or resilience as your 21st century skill, and you might be working on defense or attack, for example, in your game-based skill, depending on the game that you are playing. We label so we run typically once a week for an hour, all of our clubs, all of the sessions within the program, we label with one each of those 21st century skills and game-based skills. So firstly, we demonstrate that that's what the students will be doing. We then accumulate and count the number of sessions that students have done in each of those skills. And we've also built technology in what we do to extrapolate some data around skill levels within those things as well. And then at the end of that, we display that within our platform, but we also produce a student certificate for the school and for the parents and for the student so that they can demonstrate the value of what they've done. And that has definitely, and it has been hugely well received. So we've had to focus on it because of what we do, but it has been definitely extremely beneficial.
Okay. And do you think UK EdTech startups are doing enough to provide evidence-based results, or is there still a major gap in that sector?
I mean, I can only really talk of personal experience, but I think it's definitely a fair question to think about
Yeah,
when you're running a startup, because when you have a first customer, what you should be doing, in my view, in the first 5 to 10, let's say, is asking them, when our product is doing what you want it to do, how is it affecting your daily life? Can you measure it? What testimonial can you say? Are there any metrics you can give us? And then you need to be shouting about that. So I would totally agree, whether it's our tool save your admin, half an hour a day, or this is our impact on skill building in co-curricular programs. I would 100% agree that you should be highlighting that as early as possible. And on top of that, that then becomes a habit and you will continue to do that. It's much easier to do that from the start and it just be part of what you do than to add it in later, so with Diagon, we've done the former approach, but with the previous startup, we did the latter. It still worked, but it wasn't a habit.
okay. So, David, we've walked through funding, regulations, adoption, scaling, and impact, 5 of the biggest challenges facing UK EdTech startups. Looking ahead, which technologies or trends excite you the most for the next wave of UK tech innovation?
Well, I think, unfortunately, this is a fairly boring and predictable answer, but I think how AI is going to change, like almost everything that we do, is going to be fascinating. I think that one nugget that I've tried to follow that someone else told me is lean in, don't lean away, just try stuff. And I think that's so valuable because there aren't that many experts in AI really at the moment. It's new for all of us.
Yeah.
So I've definitely found leaning in has been really important. I found an AI email tool to help me draft emails that's definitely saving me, even in the last week, 20, 25 minutes a day, which is fantastic, right? So all of the way that we can embrace AI
Yeah.
more safely, etc. But I think that is fascinating, and I do think its impact on education will be enormous, especially in secondary. I wonder what the secondary education will look like in 10 years' time.
Yeah. And if you had one piece of advice for a founder just starting up an edtech business today, what would it be?
Assuming that they have, clearly thought through their product and fairly sure they have product market fit, then I think one of the things that is very different in edtech to other industries is the lengthy sales cycle. And therefore, you need to be able to it will be 2 years almost certainly before you have any significant revenues. Not any revenue, but anything that feels like it's, enough to pay yourself a decent salary. I think that's almost from all of the founders that I've spoken to, and I love talking to founders at
Yeah.
conferences. So I think expecting to kind of earn no money for 2 years,
Yeah.
or to have to finance your personal outgoings for 2 years in a creative way, is probably the biggest hurdle you will face. If you think that if you think you can get a product to market in 6 months and you're going to be earning loads of money in 6 months, or earning enough money to survive in 6 months, it's unlikely that that's the case. Schools buy once a year typically. As a startup, you will find that they will buy more slowly than, because you've got to prove yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, you need to be able to live lean, or find investment, or have a way to survive, a side project,
Of course.
an existing income to get yourself through those early and probably 2 to 3 years.
Okay. And what would you say is your biggest challenge right now at Diagon?
For us, we need to grow our team now. We probably need another couple of members of staff. We've got 7 members of staff now, but we're still spinning too many plates on a per member of staff basis, including the founding team. And it's just inefficient. We miss things and we wish we didn't miss things. So yeah, I think when you are trying to balance the revenue that you have, your need for staffing, that is a huge challenge. We're going through some, growing pains. We're not toddlers anymore in this space that we're in terms of Diagon. We're probably, teenagers, but we're going through, excuse the analogy, but we're going through those kind of, if you like, those growing pains.
Yeah.
And trying to mature is our challenge. It's quite fun. I've spent, the last
Yeah.
2 days
Yeah.
on similar issues, related issues. It's quite fun, but
Yeah.
it's also quite tiring.
Yeah, that's okay. And if we're looking into the future of Diagon, where do you see your company in the next 6 to 12 months?
For us, we have partnered with a lot of the really good school associations. So whether those are UK associations like ISA, like IAPS, or whether it's international associations like COBIS and BSME and ECIS and TISI actually in India, those things have been really, really important to us. So we are really, really grateful to the association partners that we have. And there are 2 or 3 other strategic partners that we've been talking to and would like to continue to, and would like to partner with. So that for us is our focus, because we want to run the competitions for the biggest associations in our market. And we are on the right path, and we're enjoying doing that and enjoying working with our partners. So that for us is we believe is the driver for growth, because if we can run competitions for those associations, which number sort of 3,000 plus schools, then we have a great way to get in front of those schools and hopefully make them longer term clients, sell
Yeah.
them additional programs,
Yeah.
etc.
Okay. Well, that sounds really interesting and exciting as well. So, David, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm sure many of the founders will take away valuable cautionary notes about the challenges that arise with EdTech startups. Where can listeners connect with you and learn more about Diagon?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn at David Higginson, and if you go to diagon.gg, then my email address is on the website, and I'd be happy to hear from anyone. I really enjoy conversations like this, Annika, so
Yeah.
thanks for having me.
More welcome.
And I'm happy to talk to other founders, because once you've opened Pandora's box, it's a great and interesting place.
Of course, it leads to so many opportunities.
That's right.
So, a big thank you for David for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please sure to subscribe, leave a review, like, and share. Thank you very much.
Thank you.